Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. In the last one we reached the ice pyramid here and now we're stuck behind a wall. Okay then. I can see a switch in the statue, but can't reach it. Let's push it with something. And thus the sword's actual infield use becomes apparent around halfway through the game. Kind of strange, but okay. Well, I say halfway. This game's length is actually kind of hard for me to split evenly because even though there's 4 major areas for us to visit, you're not exactly halfway through when you finish the second one. And, wait, where did this enemy come from? There's nothing on the field. Now they're throwing random encounters in? Strange design decision, but I guess they wanted to get the ball rolling and then just decided to change it up halfway through. Okay. And most of the enemies here are things we saw on the battlefields around here as usual, as well as the Wintry Cave. But no, now we have the magic mirror. Did you hear that sound? You might remember some people back in Aquarius said that the magic mirror reflects the monsters. That's because the monsters in this area are not random encounters. They're still set encounter points like that, but you actually cannot see them until you get the magic mirror. A bit strange because you can actually get through the entire area without the magic mirror. There's nothing roadblocking you into getting it. It sounds like the most use you'd get out of it is on your first playthrough, but honestly, I think if you're like just trying to go through the game, you might get more use of it on the second playthrough because you can avoid enemies you just do not feel like fighting. On your first playthrough, I really recommend you go after every fight, not only because it makes the game feel more complete, but also just because experience points on the first playthrough are still very useful. Because later game can still have some issues. Either way, first enemy for the part is a Fanguid, 400 HP, 231 experience points, 9 gold. Weak to fire and can blind you, but as you can see, when they're on their own, a jumbo bomb is all you need to take them out, really. Jumbo bombs are going to be really useful in the case you're on a 1v1 encounter, or I guess 2v1 encounter. Just because the unspread damage is really good. It's actually one thing I like about the game is that they are, through a good amount of the game, constantly giving you new weapon upgrades, so while the enemies will still be dealing more damage to you as well, you'll also be keeping up with more damage to them. It's just a matter at that point of who dies first. Very often them, but I admit, even though this game is on the easy side, it's still very possible to die if you're not paying attention. Oh, and this is the enemy spam room for the dungeon, I see. There is usually one room in every dungeon that is just constantly spammed with enemies, and it's mostly just so they always have a way to give you experience points, but I'm not gonna lie, it can be kind of annoying when it comes to editing. Either way, next new enemy is the Stony Roost. 350 HP, 165 experience points, 6 gold, resistant to earth, but takes more damage from shoot type attacks, so as you can see, the arrows are really good against that. But they can petrify you, so watch out for that. They're basically cockatrices. And you know, admittedly, one thing I haven't really talked about the game much, I think all the overworld sprites for the enemies are really adorable. Either way, next new enemy is not that adorable, the Sphinx. 260 HP, 201 experience points, 9 gold, weak to earth, so quick's a pretty good way to get some damage in on them. And they can confuse you, which is the biggest danger from them. In fact, as I've said before, the most dangerous thing that could happen to you in this game is if you or your party member get confused. Just because at that point, it's all luck whether or not you're like, say, Benjamin gets confused. There's nothing stopping the game from having him use Quake on your party and just almost getting wiped in one shot. It's kind of stupid, but at the same time, it at least adds some actual things to be afraid of. And the next new enemy is a Gather. 360 HP, 192 experience points, 9 gold. Weak against bomb-type attacks. They work something else, but we don't have access to that for a while now. They can blind you, paralyze you, and I think they can also blow themselves up if they're low enough in HP and just do their HP and damage. And already the next new enemy is the Freezer Crab. 410 HP, 237 experience points, 9 gold. Weak against the axe still, so that's about all you really need to know. I don't even think they can inflict the status ailment on you, so yeah. And I think that's actually all the new enemies for this dungeon. Admittedly, the dungeons in this game are those that are still very lengthened by the random encounters, well, not encounters, random encounters throughout them. Because, for the sake of scale, without editing, this part was 84 minutes long, which if I recall correctly is also the running time for the first Evil Dead movie. Whereas now, as you can see in editing, it's just a few seconds over a half hour. Most of the editing came from this part, most of the editing in this part, rather, came from just taking the fights out of this area. I want to say it took the part down from the hour and 24, all the way down to maybe the 45-minute mark. Which, that's a lot of encounters to edit out. Admittedly, in a way, it's almost worse than the mainline Final Fantasy games in that regard, because, at least in the main Final Fantasies, random encounters are just that, random. So, you can generally have some decent spouts without them and such, and even then, a lot of the time, they don't take as long. Admittedly, and this is more so on my editing side, I probably could have just made the parts for this game shorter, like several 15-minute parts instead of the comparatively smaller amount of roughly 30-minute parts that I've edited so far. But that's just due to my usual thing that I mentioned a couple times, where I always do what I write down in my notes in a single recording session, albeit even if the recording is split up into multiple parts, if you get what I mean. So that I always am organized with that. Though, admittedly, thinking about it, that has gotten me into trouble before where I've had to split parts in half. Usually if the part gets over an hour, thinking about it, I think I definitely had to do that in Final Fantasy IV, and I think Final Fantasy 3, maybe even Final Fantasy 2. I've had a chain of doing that with the mainline Final Fantasy games for Kenny, if you haven't noticed. Which means, hey, maybe the finale for this game will be shorter than that, and I'll actually, you know, not have to edit that extra bit. Maybe I'll finally break that chain. I hope. I say I hope because I've recorded the entire game for this, but the way I do a lot of my LPs nowadays is I always have the game footage entirely recorded before I edit, and then I edit each part as I go, and also doing the commentary for each part as the editing is finished. So admittedly, in that regard, it takes me a bit longer to get the actual parts done, but at the same time, I also can just do a bunch of recording and editing all at once. So, a bit combined in that. Got enough enemies in the way of their game? Yikes. I at least like that they put a good amount of enemies in your way, though, because in the case you're like me on some playthroughs I've done in this game where I don't really screw around with enemies that aren't directly on my path and I just go straight through, you're at least getting some experience points out of the way. And admittedly, doing a pure in-the-way enemy run is actually a pretty fun way to do the game because it's basically a challenge run. But on the whole, I actually do recommend in your first playthrough just fighting everything in your way so you can have the experience points to back yourself up. That's a lot of enemies. Yeah, we'll be doing that in a few moments. And you might be wondering how you get down there. Simple. Fall down. Pretty simple. And you actually get a nice little treasure trove here, not only of just standard use items, but after we jump up here, we can see there's a red chest over there. We'll be getting that in a moment. First, though, we want to stab the statue so we can actually get out of here. And now let's fight all 4 of those enemies at once, just because I don't want to have to edit in, like, 4 transitions in a row and potentially make my editor die. And here we get the Noble Armor, the next armor piece for Benjamin. Doubles the defense of the old armor and gives us a resistance to, I think that was poison and water ice. It's a bit odd because the game actually has separate definitions for the 2 things. Some attacks are considered water elemental, but some are considered ice elemental, but they're considered the exact same element in the game's code, so that's a bit weird. Kind of reminds me of paralysis, and I think it was one of the Greybeard shots they could do at you in Skyrim, where they're both considered the same status ailment, they just have a different animation. And that's probably the first time I brought up Skyrim in my videos in maybe forever. Not actually that big of an Elder Scrolls fan, just not my kind of series. I meant the amount of work that goes into those games is extraordinarily admirable, though, from the actual size of the world and all the lore they have to put in. That's a lot of good work there. That's just not my favorite kind of thing to play. And gee, I wonder what I'm supposed to do in this room. Though actually, it took me a few minutes to realize what I had to do in this room my first playthrough, because obviously we have to do something with that cracked panel in the center of the room. However, early on, I thought you had to jump on it. You have to blow it up. Excuse me for thinking that thin ice can be jumped on to be broken. It's not like that's sensical. Admittedly, though, I see why they would do that from a programming standpoint in case you accidentally leave too early. And now we have to stab this statue right here. I actually forget what happens if you stab any of the other 5. And wow, that's a lot of enemies. But here we get the Knight Sword, which is a great weapon. 100 attack, which is a pretty decent upgrade over anything else you have. In fact, with it, you can basically one-shot any standard enemy in here with Benjamin's physical attacks. With that, though, we're going to be doing a lot of mass editing just because I don't want to put all these transitions next to each other. There we go. And what the hell? Oh, I guess we're at the boss fight. Mwaha! I'm enjoying our little game. Okay, bye. That entity there is considered a decoy for some reason. I don't get the point of it because, well, there is no point to it. They never bring it up again. I think you can actually entirely skip it. So what's with that? And even then, it's not like we're actually that far from the boss fight. The boss fight's like 2 rooms from here. Now this is interesting. We can stab the statue here to make those 2 things beneath us open up like that. However, these 2 chests, you have to go back into this room from the other direction to get to them. Both of those chests contain 10 arrows, and it's just not worth going for. Those are like the only 2 chests I can recall in the game I actively skip. But now let's walk across this very carefully. Don't want to fall back down. You think you're a knight, huh? Fwaha! Take this! And now time for the next boss fight, the Ice Golem. 6,500 HP, 246 XP, 0 gold because it's a boss fight. Weak to fire, resistant to both water and earth, so Quake is not going to be too useful for you here. Can put you to sleep with his Hypno-Sleep ability, and he has a very dangerous ability known as Snowstorm, which does split damage on your party and then heals him. So if you have one party member alive and he uses that, they're probably going to die. Basic strategy we want to use for this, though, we want to use fire with both characters just because that's the most damage you can do in per turn, really. You want to have the claw equipped, unlike me, because I forgot to do that, just so you can actually get that extra magic damage in. Though, in the case you run out of fire charges and you decide not to use a seed, the sword is a very good alternative just so you can get damage in. And wow, that's a 4th of my HP even though I'm resistant to water. This guy can actually bring the damage pretty well. Him putting the characters to sleep is probably the deadliest thing he can do aside from killing a character and then using Snowstorm. Mostly because at that point, you have nothing that can really fight back until he physically attacks that character. Thankfully, most of his attacks are considered physical, I believe. I don't even think there's actually a distinctional difference between physical and magic damage in this game now I think about it. But it is notable that you really do not want him to put sleep on your characters. I noticed that he tends to use Snowstorm more the farther you get into his HP, though. Especially when he's on, like, his 3rd sprite onwards in terms of his physical showing damage. There was probably a much better way I could have phrased that. Is when he generally tends to use that the most. And there he is! Yeah, it's about 200 damage split between the 2 characters. That would be very, very bad if you used it on your one character. Because at that point, if you have, like, 2/3 of your HP, you're probably not going to survive it. Phoebe is the one you probably want to have curing in this fight in the case you need to. Just because, at this point, she has more magic charges for her fire and thus can actually be worth sacrificing a turn with. Though if anyone does fall in this battle, you want it to be Benjamin, mostly because Phoebe has the life spell and he doesn't. Because there is no items in this game that have a life spell effect, so that's kind of annoying. But there he is. Ken is easily the hardest fight so far, but still not too hard. And that's the Crystal of Water restored. Also, I gotta admit, I actually really like the theme that plays whenever a crystal appears. It's just a nice little remix to the title theme. The crystal! I'll go back to Aquaria to see if it melted. Don't forget to see Grandpa! Right. Bye. And like with the Bone Dungeon, make sure to get the river coin right here because we need that to progress through the Focus Tower. And now they make us walk the long way out again, so I'll just cut back out to here. And Aquaria's looking pretty dang restored if you ask me. That was a lot of voice cracks in a row. And now that we actually have restored this area, let's head around and talk to the NPCs to see what they got to say about it. Mostly just because there's not much NPC dialogue in the game anyway, so might as well show what there is off, right? Though I should know, not every single NPC has changed dialogue after every key event in the area. Some just stay universal, and obviously those who are actual shops just never change at all once you actually unlock them as shops. Spencer's a good friend of Captain Max. They're both kind of weird. Well, that's kind of blunt, little girl. I don't know what the point of the platform in that room is. I don't think anything is ever placed there. Admittedly, I do like how the towns in this game are laid out because they feel like RPG towns in that regard. Though admittedly, they're still very small, but they fit with the game. And something I'm not sure about in the game is what those white orbs we see in a lot of the houses are supposed to be. I guess they might be lamps or something? But they serve no purpose in the game. They're just there as graphics, which is weird. At least I don't think they do anything if you try to interact with them, so... Either way, let's head into Phoebe's house now that we've restored the town to see what we have to do. And there she is, for some reason, investigating one of the beds. Feeling tired, Phoebe? Thanks. Have you met Grandpa? He's in the tunnel under the house. Okay. But we actually do have to head under the house. You see either of those little openings above or to the right of the house? We actually need to walk through the water and investigate those. A bit strange, but I'll take it. Also, a weird little missed opportunity that this game does that Final Fantasy Legend 3 did not miss. If you try to jump underneath something like a bridge, nothing happens. In Legend 3, you would actually hit your head and have a little dialogue that goes, ow! Yeah, I like that detail. Mind you, I just really like Legend 3. It's probably my favorite out of the Legend trilogy now that I think about it. Mind you, it's also because I'm just not a fan of some of the gameplay systems from 1 and 2. And also the fact there's very little story in 1. 2 at least has a story, albeit it's more per area storyline like the entirety of 1. I guess you would be Spencer. The ice is melted! How did it happen? Phoebe and I restored the crystal water's light. Then you're the knight in the prophecy! The shield has found its owner. A shield used by a knight in days gone by. Captain Mac found it. Captain Mac! I've heard that name before. For years, Mac's been studying a prophecy. On his way back from doing some research, the lake dried up and his ship ended up on a rock ledge. Oh, we actually could have seen that earlier, actually, back at the Water of Life, Temple of Life. But that's no problem. If we dig from here, we should be able to reach the ship. Anyway, here's the key. The shield is hidden in Focus Tower. The Venus key, okay. By the way, Fireburg's been having some strong earthquakes lately. I think, now I think about it, it's theoretically possible to skip talking to Spencer and just go right to the next area. But you do want to get that Venus key just because the item we get for getting it is very useful. Either way, just because it takes like a minute to walk back out to the world map, I'm going to spare you that. And let's head on over to the next area, but not quite. You see, because we restored Aquaria, these next 2, maybe even 3 battlefields have unlocked. So let's take care of these. I don't think there's any new enemies in there. There's just Fangwids and I think maybe even some Sphinxes somewhere in here. It's more or less here just to be the last few experience points you can get in Aquaria before heading over to the Fireburg area. Though I think, now that I think about it, I think Aquaria might have the most battlefields out of any area in the game. Which, cool, I guess, but kind of annoying. At the same time, though, I'm not going to complain about the experience points, you know? And here we get the exit spell. Benjamin's actually the only character in the game that gets this, if I recall. If used in a dungeon, you'll warp out of it. However, if used in battle, it can act as an instant death spell. However notable, if you use it as an instant death spell, you don't get any of the experience points or gold for that enemy. So, use it at your own risk. Admittedly, I could recommend waiting a few more minutes still to take on these battlefields, because taking on a battlefield with Benjamin alone at any point in the game is admittedly a risky maneuver, because if you get a status ailment inflicted on you, that can very much spell your demise. Though at the same time, death doesn't really matter that much in this game, because if you die, you're given an option of give up, and if you say no on give up, you restart the battle with your exact stats, so you can just take it about and go about it a different way. Also, the wintry cave there which I've been actually, I realized, referring to the ice cavern, I think, as the Winter Cave the entire time. Sorry about that. Has nothing for us right now. I don't even think it has any chests we can reach. Some awful news made Katsumak race from his home. Anyway, you seek Ruben and Fireburg. What? Say, what's the statue for? You're just the king of vague. Either way, let's blow this up and get to this red chest up here. Notable, if you didn't have the Venus key, you couldn't get the Venus shield, which is our next shield upgrade. And I'm looking at the wrong thing. It doubles the defense we had from the previous one and gives us an immunity from paralysis, which is really useful. Just because you can't do anything about it, aside from use the heal spell. Also, I'm pushing the statue wrong. You want to push it down one more tile and push it all the way up to be next to that block there. Because otherwise, it won't stick to its place when you actually leave the area. What we actually have to do now is place this right and head back to the main focus tower area we've gone to through most of the game. Just because this is just so we can put that statue there and progress onwards. Admittedly, it's a bit redundant in a way, though, because now we're back in the main focus tower area that we've been to throughout the game. And the water coin that we got there is needed to enter the next area anyway, so why have the secondary roadblock there? I guess it's so you can make sure you get the blizzard spell or something. It's not like the Venus shield or blizzard spell are required for the game. They're helpful, but yeah. Admittedly, though, it is all worth it at the end because we're actually coming up on my favorite part of the game. The Fireburg section is my favorite section of the map. Not only because, well, as the name implies, fire, but also just because it has some of my favorite music. Also, I'll take the cure potions. I do recommend using your cure potions quite a good amount throughout the game just because you get so many of them. And this is one of those games that you can open a chest if you have the item at max, but you can't collect it, so you have to just use them. Also, those earthquakes happen every time you move from one location to another on the map, and the Fireburg music is my favorite track in the game. For those of you who actually remember my top 10 RPG battle themes from a few years ago at this point, this was the song that played during the outro. Either way, let's check out the Fireburg bar. It's technically the end, but it's also a bar. And it's also notable because this is the first place in the game that we can talk to this dude over here and buy seeds. Thank God. And they cost a good amount, but hey, free MP recovery basically, otherwise, sure. Is that Tristam? Well, listen to this band? Sure. Ah, Johnny Be Good. Man, the Super Nintendo really liked remixing this. Nice to see you again, kid. Okay, I guess I won't talk to you. Goodbye, Tristam. Either way, let's actually progress this plot here, shall we? Hello there, unique NPC. The volcano seemed odd, so my husband Arian climbed into it with his friend. But his buddy freaked out, ran home, and locked himself in. A boulder is keeping us from saving Arian. You're Ruben, huh? You heard about the crystal fire? I can't deal with that now. I've got to help Dad. Well, why don't you let me help you? He's stuck behind a boulder. There'd be no problem if we had a mega grenade, but only Dad's friend can use them. Where's the guy's house? In this town, but he shut himself in. We'll pay him a visit anyway. Come on. And Ruben has joined the party. Ruben is entirely a physical fighter. He only has one spell, and it's life, just so you have in the case where Benjamin falls. However, he makes up for it by being a pretty good physical fighter. He's immune to fire, though we need to do the usual reset to make sure his immunities actually apply. And his Morning Star weapon there is extraordinarily powerful. It's about as powerful as a jumbo bomb. In fact, it's more so. Though it's worth noting, the game, in terms of weakness tables, considers the Morning Star weapon an axe-type weapon. So in the case you're up against something weak against axes, make sure you use that. Hi. A mask lets you see monsters through the gas in the volcano. That's totally not going to come into play at all. We also want to head into this house, because this lady sells the battle axe for 500 gold, and I will take that. It's the next axe upgrade, but it's also just really powerful. Let's see. 117? Yeah, that's more powerful than the jumbo bomb. Now, this is actually a point in the game where I actually got a little bit stuck on my first playthrough, just because the way you have to activate events here is a bit specific. You can't go ahead and just talk to the next person to progress things. You actually need to head down here, go through the secret passage. You actually don't have to do this. But this is how you grab that heal potion. Bit guide dang it, but at least they show you the door there so you can figure out there's something you have to do to get to it. And you actually have to actively investigate this door. It's locked. No matter what you do, you can't open that. So we need to head up here, jump over to this dude, and talk to Tristam. What's up? We went to the guy's house in the pit, but the guy wouldn't let us in. You two want in? Then take this. And we get the multi-key. I'd like to note this is the only purpose that Tristam is in this town. In fact, I probably could have removed the key plotline entirely, and Tristam would have no purpose at this point. Kind of weird development there, I guess, but I'll take it. It opened! Hey there, dude. I ran when I saw the monsters in the volcano. A huge boulder fell and trapped Arian. Only a mega grenade can free him. How do you use one? Just throw it! And we get the strongest bomb type in the game, the mega grenade. Go through the abandoned mine to take out the boulder. The mega grenades are interesting though. They are the strongest bomb type in the game at 162 power, but they are the only bomb type in the game that you actively throw. So now you actually have a bit of range that you can take out items with. It's basically just there so you can have railroading and have more powerful weapon for the next dungeons, yeah, but it's going to be useful. The usual bomb traits still apply, split damage if there's multiple enemies, but they never miss. With that, our business in Fireburg's town is concluded, so let's actually go and take care of the battlefields around the area. And starting off in this one, I think this one's exclusively the next type of enemy, the Plant Man. 460 HP, 258 XP, 9 gold, weak to fire and axe type attacks. And I think they can poison you, and they also have a bad breath attack, which I don't think is as scary as the cousin is later on. I think it might just paralyze you. But since Ruben's weapon is considered an axe, as you can figure, this one's pretty easy. And we just get rewarded some XP. Next new enemy is the Sting Rat, 420 HP, 252 experience points, 9 gold, weak to Blizzard, and that's about it. I think they can paralyze you, blind you, and sting, poison you. That's about it. And the next new enemy is a Jelly, 420 HP, 243 experience points, 9 gold, that sounds familiar. Weak to bomb type attacks, I think they can just do damaging attacks on you. I think there's nothing really special about them otherwise. They might be able to inflict a status ailment, but I honestly forget. And for clearing out this battlefield, I think we just get some gold. No, we get the Gemini Crest. That allows us to warp between Gemini crest locations, though that's nothing too key. In fact, crests are only useful when you actually actively have to get them for storyline reasons. Because I don't think that crest is ever used in the story itself. Ruben's also going to be able to take out a lot of enemies at this point in one shot. The only ones I think he actively can't is the next new enemy. And also, speaking of which, I believe we're about to fight them. The Flazzards. 450 HP, 261 experience points, 9 gold, weak to water, resistant to fire. And they can paralyze you, I believe, so watch out for that. These are probably the hardest enemies in this area, just because they can survive some of the attacks more easily. Also notable at this point, if you're using magic, for this next area or so, multi-targeting is not going to be really worth it, because at least with black magic spells, the damage they do one split is just not going to kill them in one shot, and you just want to take out as many enemies as you can, as quickly as you can. Flazzards are also going to be rather common, if you can't tell. Not only through the battlefields, but the next area in particular, I think, has quite a few of them. I do, admittedly, very minor thing. I see why they didn't do it, but I kind of wish the battlefields had an exclusive battlefield fight theme, just to kind of go with the idea that you're doing it almost for sport. Either way, next new enemy is the Red Cap, 480 HP, 294 experience points, 12 gold, weak to water, and I think they might be able to put you to sleep. They're probably also a fairly annoying enemy if you let them live too long just because of that, just because Between the paralysis ability of the Flazards and their ability to put you to sleep, you might not be doing anything for a couple turns. Thankfully, they're still basically the Goblin type item for the game, so they're still rather weak. I don't think they can actually do that much damage outwardly from memory. Either way, with that and us getting the Thunder spell, thank God a Wizard type spell, finally some good damage, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 4, we'll be accessing the mine, and hopefully helping Arian get loose from that boulder. See you guys then.